The mountain bike industry is starting to head in a direction that either makes perfect sense or is completely ridiculous. And honestly, I love them for it. 32-inch wheels are coming. Mountain bikes really started on 26-inch wheels, and then 29s came along. And it broke the industry, broke the internet. After that, the industry saw an opportunity to sell everyone new bikes again. And thus, the 27.5 was born. 27.5s really showed up as a compromise. Taller than 26s, shorter than 29s, better for shorter riders, and better clearance for long travel suspension. It really seemed like the 27.5 was going to win, but it didn't win. 29ers won, and they won hard. Even though there's been a bit of a resurgence in 27.5s, the 29 is still king. Now here's the thing about 32-inch wheels. They existed long before mountain biking cared about them. Custom tall person bike builders like Zinn Cycles and DirtySixer have been building them for years, really building bikes for riders that are 6'4" and above. They really didn't cross over into mainstream mountain biking because of one glaring problem: tires. They just couldn't get tires. If you wanted a 32-inch mountain bike tire before 2025, you had to go shopping literally in the unicycle aisle. And now that I say that, I don't know that the unicycle aisle is a thing that exists. But anyway, Trek apparently at one point joked internally that their 32er project had been on hold for almost a decade because they were just waiting for someone to make the rubber. Everything really changed in early 2025 for 32s. Maxxis invested in new molds and new machinery, and the Aspen was born. Created a 32 by 2.4, mainly for cross-country racing. They showed it off at the Taipei Cycle Show, and everyone in the industry took notice and decided, I guess this is real. Since then, the industry has moved pretty fast to make 32s happen. While not widely adopted, the 32s are real. You've got several companies that either have them in production or they're in prototype phase, like BMC and also Stoll bikes. But in the research I did in preparation for this video, I couldn't find a reliable source for those 32 by 2.4 Maxxis Aspens, but I'm sure they're out there. All right, so why does wheel size actually matter? Let's do this properly. Your wheel hits a rock or a root. The angle at which you hit that obstacle determines how much of your forward momentum gets converted into being launched into the air. Bigger wheel, shallower angle of attack. Shallower angle of attack means a smoother rollover. Going from a 26 to a 29 drops that angle of attack by about 4.5%. The jump from 29 to 32 gives you almost the same result with a drop of the angle of attack. If you've ridden a 26-inch bike on older mountain bikes or on a dirt jumper, then you already know the improvement difference between a 26 and a 29. It's the sensation of rolling over something instead of into it. 26s feel rougher, a little more jittery, but they're a lot more playful. 29s are smoother, but you're not going to be able to whip them into the corners quite as well. Here's the way I think about it. A 100mm bump, which is about 4 inches, on a 32-inch wheel is going to feel like a 90mm bump, which is about 3.5 inches on a 29er. It's not much, but it's not nothing. You're also going to get better momentum, a longer contact path, so that means you're going to get better traction. And that longer wheelbase means you're going to have more stability at speed. And because the tire flexes over a longer arc, rolling resistance actually drops slightly as well. The physics here are solid, so this isn't a gimmick, but the disadvantages are also real. Bigger wheels are heavier and harder to accelerate. The extra rotational mass means that they want to stay in a straight line, which isn't always what you want on a tight technical trail. Again, think about the playfulness of a 27.5 or even a 26-inch bike. And then there's the geometry problem, which honestly could probably be its own video. You can't just make the wheel bigger for the sake of making the wheel bigger. There are some real challenges with the geometry of bikes when you move up in size. For instance, the fork has to grow by about 32mm in axle to crown just to maintain clearance. Factor in the travel, and you're looking at about 70mm in extra stack height compared to a 29er. That's significant. 70mm. That's the difference between a bike that fits and doesn't fit at all. Early 32-inch prototypes have had to use deeply negative stems and ultra short head tubes just to get the handlebars anywhere close to where you actually want to be. So who's actually making these things? First, the OGs, the niche builders. Zinn Cycles out of Colorado, they specialize in bikes for very tall riders. They released the BIG 32er, one of the first production full suspension mountain bikes with 32s. DirtySixer might be the OG of OGs in this space, because they've been in this space even longer. They're calling their 32-inch hardtail the world's first production mountain bike built for the 32-inch wheel size. Now the big brands are starting to dip their toes into the 32-inch world as well. BMC unveiled a full suspension 32-inch prototype to the Andorra Cross Country World Cup in 2025. BMC factory rider Titouan Caro actually rode it for 2 practice laps. That's it, 2 laps. The entire paddock came out to stare at it, but they didn't race it. There's other brands in the mix as well. I mentioned earlier, Stoll Bikes unveiled a full carbon 32er, a cross-country bike called the P32. KTM is also reportedly working on a full 32-inch hardtail that they're saying can be ridden by anyone, which is either a bold engineering claim or a very optimistic marketing line. Bike Ahead built a fully custom 32er that came in at just 9.6 kilograms. Faction Bike Studio even has one in development. And Manitou sent a 32-inch fork prototype to frame builder Daniel Yang, who ended up just building a frame to just test the fork out. And like I mentioned before, Trek has been thinking about this for the better part of a decade. So it's good to see that we've got so many companies on it. So now we have to deal with the elephant in the room. Can shorter riders actually ride these things? The short answer is probably yes, eventually. But right now, it's a bit more complicated. The geometry problem that I mentioned, that 70 millimeters of extra stack, isn't just an aesthetic problem. If you have 32s on a smaller frame size, say a small or extra small, it becomes genuinely hard to manage. And here's the thing. The biggest concern isn't toe overlap, which is what everyone assumes is going to be the main problem. People who've actually ridden these things say the true problem is what they're calling butt overlap. This is where the larger rear wheel and deeper bottom bracket bring the tire 60 to 70 millimeters closer to your body at all times. BMC is so confident in the clearance of their 32er that they're saying that they can fit a rider all the way down to 160 centimeters or around 5'3". Their harder question is whether a 160 centimeter rider should even be piloting a bike with tires this big. These things have dynamics that require a lot more active input to prevent you from just becoming a passenger. For a little bit of context here, a 29er is generally recommended for riders that are 5'7" and above. And that 27.5 resurgence that we're seeing a little bit of right now, there's an exciting reason for it. We're getting more and more women in the sport. So that makes total sense. But where do the 32s fit? If the 29ers are already pushing the limit for average height riders, then the 32 is going to push it even further. My honest take, a 32 as a full bike setup is likely just going to be geared towards taller riders for the foreseeable future. But as a front wheel on a mullet configuration, that's where I think things are going to get really interesting. 29 in the front, 27.5 in the rear. And it exists because it gives you good rollover in the front and good clearance and agility in the rear. So if the industry keeps doing what it does, then the next logical step is to have 32s in the front and a 29 in the rear. Maximum rollover up front, modern 29 geometry and clearance in the rear. So trail geometry where you need it and familiar handling where it matters. For a tall rider, this all actually makes a lot of sense. But here's where my brain starts to drift. There's an OG mullet out there, and it's existed for over 200 years. It was called the penny farthing. Big wheel in front, small wheel in the back, rider looking absolutely unhinged. Now, look at a modern mullet mountain bike. Big wheel in the front, small wheel in the back. I don't think we're getting that far off by adding 32s to the mix. I'm not saying we've gone full circle, but come on. At some point, the size is going to have to level off. If not, in 20 years, we're going to be running 42s or 46s. All I'm trying to say is that the penny farthing is a mullet, and I'll die on that hill, probably while riding one. But genuinely though, if we adopt a mullet standard of 32 in the front and 29 in the rear, the geometry benefits stack up. You'd have a longer wheelbase, better rollover, rear clearance would be maintained. For a taller rider, it could be a genuinely excellent bike. The question is whether frame builders can get the front end geometry under control. And based on the 32-inch prototypes that I've seen, we still have a ways to go. Here's what I find generally interesting from a data standpoint. Right now, all the specs that we're discussing, what the brands say, what the prototypes look like, that's all marketing and engineering. What we don't have yet are real world examples of what people are actually riding. And that's something I've been building towards with ShredSpec. It's a free setup tracker where you can log your bike, log your components, you can log your suspension settings, all of your pressures. The goal is to build a real picture of what people are actually running. When 32-inch wheels start showing up in people's garage builds, that'll tell us something that the spec sheets can't, that people are actually riding these. The link for ShredSpec is in the description. Go ahead and go out and log your build. Anyway, back to 32s. So where does this land? 32s are real. The physics back them up. The brands are committed, or some brands are committed. The supply chain is slowly turning on. And for very tall riders, they solve a genuine fit problem that 29s just couldn't quite solve. But they're not for everyone. And the geometry problems do exist. The fit constraints are real. And the jury is still completely out on whether shorter riders get more from a 32er than from a 29er or a 27.5. My honest take on this is that 32s are going to find a very genuine place to live in XC, and potentially as a front wheel on the next generation mullet. I just don't think the industry as a whole is going to pivot to embrace 32s on all bikes. The 26 to 29 transition was about getting everybody better bikes. The 29 to 32 transition feels more like tall riders finally getting bikes that actually fit them, which is fair. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you want more of this. Also, don't forget to check out ShredSpec.